5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the old Sith Empire would emerge on the galactic scene and attack the known galaxy. After a year of intense fighting, the Jedi and the Republic eventually defeated Naga Sadow and the Sith, and nearly 1,000 years of peace and prosperity reigned over the galaxy. But the dark side will always return. Its temptations too strong, and even the most noble fall to its constricting grip. Exar Kun is one such tale, and almost had the Republic and the Jedi under his complete and total control. Born approximately 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Exar Kun was considered to be one of the most promising young Jedi in the Order. His potential was rivaled by none, and was no doubt the greatest student of the renowned Jedi Battlemaster Vodo Sias Bas had ever trained. Kun wasn't without his faults, however, and was extremely confident in his own abilities, and naturally quick to anger. Along with this, Kun was filled with a burning curiosity regarding the Sith, and his obsession with this ancient lore eventually motivated the young knight to go on a quest for the forgotten secrets of the dark side. Eventually making his way to Onderon, Kun heard the tales of Friedan Nad, a Sith Lord who once ruled over the planet. After rescuing a pair of men, and after an interrogation and a promise of gold, the two agreed to guide Kun to Friedan Nad's tomb on the moon of Duxan. While exploring the Sith's final resting place, he came into contact with the spirit of Nod. Seeing the potential in Kun, and a way to regain his physical form, Nod directed the young Jedi to the ancient Sith homeworld of Korriban. On Korriban, however, Nad tricked the young Jedi, and released the cataclysmic energy inhabiting the temple, bringing the whole structure down on Kun. Clinging to his life, with his bones smashed in over 100 places, Kun finally succumbed and embraced the teachings of the ancient Sith, the ways of the dark side. Soon after, in his hunt for power, Kun would come into brief conflict with the fallen Jedi Ula Keldroma. At the pinnacle of their battle, the pair were interrupted by a group of Sith Lords. They anointed Exar as the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith, and Ulic, his foremost apprentice. Forming the Brotherhood of the Sith, Kun and Keldroma then initiated the Great Sith War, which at the time was one of the most brutal in galactic history. During the war, Kun damaged the Jedi Order immensely, corrupting many of his former peers to his cause, similar to the way in which another fallen Jedi, named Revan, would do nearly 4 decades later. At the height of the war, the Brotherhood attacked the Republic capital of Coruscant. During the skirmish, Kun engaged his former master, and after a heated duel, slayed Master Vodo. At the twilight of this conflict, the way of the Sith reared its ugly head once more. During the Battle of Ossus, Keldroma slayed his brother Kay in anger. Immediately recognizing what he had done, and overcome with guilt, a broken Keldroma renounced the dark side, and agreed Kun needed to be stopped, leading the Jedi to his former master's base on Yavin 4. Catching him off guard, the Jedi attacked and had Kun surrounded. Rather than surrender, however, Kun began a Sith ritual, drawing on the life force of his many followers, and used the energy to become a Sith spirit. Before Kun could finish, the Jedi, led by Nomi Sunrider, sensed Kun's intentions and created a wall of light side energy that encased the planet, imprisoning his spirit to the world. For millennia, Kun's threat was thought to be extinguished, and his spirit remained dormant. However, in 11 ABY, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker's Jedi Paraxium awakened him. Kun terrorized the New Order of Knights until the spirit of Master Boss aided them in finally eradicating the Sith once and for all. Exar Kun cemented himself in galactic history as one of the most powerful Sith Lords to ever live, and the millions who perished in the Great Sith War a clear reminder of his power.
The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way, including their quest for greater power. In fact, their endeavors are more closely tied than you might think. The Jedi seek to use their power in service to the Galactic Republic and its citizens. The Sith seek to assert their dominance across the universe, with the Republic often being a preliminary target. As such, many of the most influential Sith have held high positions within the governing body. Darth Vitiate, Darth Sidious, and the subject of our story today, Darth Krayt. Raised among the Tusken Raider tribes on the desolate world of Tatooine, Asherad Het was the son of the famed Jedi Master Sharad Het. Upon his father's death at the hands of the bounty hunter Aurra Sing, Het was taken in and received instruction from Ki-Adi-Mundi and the mysterious Dark Woman, Anya Kuro. Ashrad served for the better part of a decade until the Clone Wars erupted across the galaxy. Like the majority of his fellow Jedi, he was shoehorned into military service as a Jedi General. Braving the front lines for the entire 3-year conflict, Het's true test was yet to come. At the war's climax, Order 66, the grand plan was unleashed, and the destruction of the Jedi Order reared its ugly head. Unlike the majority of his comrades, Het managed to survive. Lost, and now full of hate, he returned to his homeworld, where he became the chieftain of his old Tusken tribe and bathed Tatooine in a sea of blood, showing its inhabitants that the Tuskens were still to be feared. After a failed duel of both philosophies and sabers with Obi-Wan Kenobi, Het was left disarmed and disgraced. Kenobi spared his life in hopes that he could one day find his way again, a mistake that would prove costly. Taking up mercenary work, Het eventually made his way to the hidden tomb of Zozan, one of the first to proclaim the title of Sith Lord. Racked with a desire for vengeance against the Empire, Ashrad accepted the Holocron's teachings, spending decades within the tombs, only to find out that the Empire and Palpatine had been overthrown by Luke Skywalker and the Rebellion once he emerged. Feeling lost and purposeless, he fled to the unknown regions, where he was captured and horrifically experimented on by the extraterrestrial species, the Yuzhong Vong. It was here that he realized his true purpose. During his imprisonment, he experienced a vision of the future, in which he ruled over the galaxy with an army of Sith at his command. Fully embracing the dark side, he escaped captivity and returned home, designating himself as Darth Krayt. Having now established the One Sith Order, he spent decades gathering followers and wreaking havoc across the universe. However, before his vision could be fulfilled, his health would begin to rapidly deteriorate, as the implants that he had unwillingly received from the Vong within his body were eating away at him. With no known cure for his ailment, he spent years in stasis, while he waited for an opportunity to present itself. He would eventually learn of the abrasive Cade Skywalker, the last known member of his bloodline. Seeking to exploit Cade's talent with a rare healing power known as Dark Transfer, Krayt eventually learned how to heal his body of his illness, only to be betrayed by his most trusted follower, Darth Warlock III. Conquering death itself, Krayt returned from the brink of death and slaughtered his Shogrian traitor. He was eventually confronted by Cade, and the duo faced off in one final battle. At the duel's climax, Krayt attempted to bend Skywalker to his side with visions of the future, only for Cade to deceptively put him down. Death itself was losing its grip on Krayt, however, as his spirit taunted Cade, even after his body had no life left. Hurling his body into the sun, Cade ended Darth Krayt's story under an unforgiving blaze, much like the start of his tale. Today, I have the pleasure of presenting this highly requested matchup alongside fellow Versus series creator Rob Terra. If you haven't checked out Rob's channel, I highly recommend you do so after finishing this video. Link in the description. As for the characters themselves, we are analysing both of them at the time of their physical deaths within the Star Wars Legends continuity. Let's get started.
Round 1.
Exar Kun is a human male, roughly in his mid-20s at the time of his physical death on Yavin. His years of extensive combat training as a Jedi Guardian, as well as being on the front lines of the Great Sith War, molded his body into the peak of his species' physicality. In terms of specific traits, Kun's speed and agility were some of his most advanced attributes. The best example of this can be seen when he was able to keep up and outmaneuver the incredibly talented Jedi Silvar. This is made even more impressive when we factor in this was before his prime, and that Jedi Knight Nomi Sunrider couldn't keep up with Sylvar's speed. Sunrider being one of the most decorated knights of her era. His speed continued to develop, and by the time of his prime, managed to produce multiple after images of this blade while fighting Voto CS boss. Kun's advanced speed and agility also didn't hamper his endurance. He managed to fight for hours against Ulic Qel-Dromo, all without tiring. If fighting one of the highest level combatants of his day for hours wasn't impressive enough, it was also a great display considering Qel-Dromo's fondness of strength-oriented strikes. Strikes that would tire and ultimately end lesser combatants. Speaking of strength, Kun's was also very well developed. His strikes had so much power behind them that they have been known to unleash shockwaves that could be heard for miles, an example being during his spar against Sylvar, once again, before his prime. To me, however, the best showings of his strength can be seen during his time as a Sith Lord. The first of which being when he managed to break Master Voto's Force-enhanced staff in two, and even more impressive, managing to punch his way through Mandalorian steel, a material with the strength to resist lightsaber blades. In my previous analysis of Kun, I stated I felt his durability was spotty, and I now have a slightly differing opinion. While I still believe he has been affected by smaller ailments, it isn't enough where I can confidently say it impacts him in a negative way. And most of the time, when hit by these smaller issues, all it does is piss him off and make him an even more dangerous combatant. His durability will not be a factor in most of, if not all of his fights, and the best example of his durability came on Korriban, when he was buried under tons of rock and managed to live long enough for the Spirit of Freedinad to heal him. At the end of the day, Exar Kun represented the peak of his species' physicality, and his unique blend of speed and agility, coupled with his overwhelming strength, make him a very dangerous out for any Jedi or Sith.
Darth Krayt was over 100 years old by the time his reign of terror was finally over. He achieved this through his time spent in stasis and having mastered Sith techniques that allowed him to prolong his own life. Having been raised among the Tusken tribes, many believe that he was a hybrid between human and Tusken. However, he did in fact reveal that the two races are not genetically compatible. As such, he boasted the adaptability and resilience that humans were famed for. During his time in captivity, his eye and arm were replaced with Vong-grown prosthetics. His new arm provided an extra level of durability than what irregular humans would allow. However, beyond that, his actual performance was largely unchanged. Even before he was cured of his grotesque implants, Krayt possessed imposing levels of physical prowess. He could throttle fully grown humanoids with one arm and all but dominated the vast majority of his opponents. Even contending with Anakin and Obi-Wan, going so far as to trade blows with them, and this was back when he was much less powerful. Furthermore, he outpaced 4 of Rowan Fel's Imperial Knights, outmaneuvering their attack sequences without giving any of them a chance to retaliate. It was during this time that he also managed to keep pace with Cade Skywalker, a feat worthy of note by itself, as Cade, like all members of the Skywalker bloodline, possessed incredible levels of combative speed. Despite his remarkable speed and strength, Krayt's most impressive and quite frankly disturbing trait was his resilience and durability. Having grown up in the harsh Tatooine deserts and survived the grueling perils of both the front lines and inconceivable torture, the Emperor was no stranger to the horrors of pain. We've seen the one Sith Emperor tank point-blank explosions and get back up. During the duel on Hadabandon, he was impaled by a lightsaber, caught in a torrent of Force lightning, and thrown off a cliff. Despite this horrific ordeal, when Warlock found him, he was shocked to see that Krayt managed to survive the entire affair. If these accomplishments weren't already impressive enough, what makes them all the more terrifying is the diminished state that the Dark Lord was in at the time. Cade would comment on his condition, pointing out that the implants were gnawing at his insides, effectively eating him from the inside, which is why so many of his battles proved to be a costly affair. Still, he persevered. Upon his rebirth, and now subsequent cure of his condition, Krayt could take full advantage of his strength with no detriments to his performance, and could fight for almost indefinite periods of time. Now the few that weren't overwhelmed by his performance before would also be hard-pressed to compete with his newfound speed and strength. In conclusion, Darth Krayt's deep immersion within the dark side grants him some of the most well-rounded and imposing physicality that any Sith could lay claim to, and could install both fear and respect in the Jedi and Sith alike. This round is surprisingly close, and not nearly as black and white as one might seem. Despite the obvious age difference, both combatants display high levels of physicality and are not affected negatively by this field. In terms of strength, we believe the two to be equals. Both have displayed superhuman strength, Kun punching his way through Mandalorian steel, and Krayt overpowering many adversaries, as well as throwing fully grown human males around with one arm, with no difficulty on his part. In terms of speed and agility, we also consider the pair to be equals.
While Krayt may seem like a helpless old man who can't move, that is far from the truth, and proved this during his fight with Darth Warlock, using his agility on multiple occasions to try and outmaneuver the Chagrian. This is more impressive as well, when taking into account that Warlock was years younger, as well as held an edge physically due to his species' inherited traits. Not to mention, while still infected by the Vong Seed, Krayt still managed to outmaneuver and defeat multiple Imperial Knights, showing once more that he is more than capable in this regard. Endurance-wise, we continue the trend of the pair being even.
Kun demonstrated this in his duel against Ulic, and Krayt countless times on the battlefield of the Clone Wars, as well as many numerous duels during his time as a Sith Lord. The best showcase once again coming against Warlock, where after the fight, the one Sith Emperor barely seemed like he was just in an intense duel to the death. What will determine this round is each combatant's level of resilience and durability. Ultimately, we give the slight edge in this trait to Darth Krayt.
It's not that Kun isn't resilient, because he is. It's more due to the fact that Krayt's showings here are, well, as Rico said, disturbing. This is a being we have seen tank point-blank explosions, get impaled by a lightsaber, caught in a torrent of force lightning, and then thrown off a cliff. And he still managed to either get back up and continue fighting, or survive when he had no right doing so. This is even more impressive when we consider for most of these feats, he was suffering from the Vong Seeds, greatly weakening his overall physical performance. Exar Kun is fairly durable as well, however he has never shown what Krayt has, and we have a hard time seeing him surviving what Krayt did on Had Abaddon. Overall, while this is a very slight advantage, we still believe it is enough to give Krayt the advantage. Darth Krayt gets the edge.
Round 2.
Although a master of the arcane ways of the dark side, Exar Kun was most known for his vaunted lightsaber ability, which he owned as a Jedi on the plains of Dantooine. As a young apprentice, he was able to keep up with his master in sparring, and eventually, as a knight, bested him on several occasions. Of his peers, only Ulic Qel-Droma could keep up with his martial prowess, and Exar had no difficulty in defeating the powerful warriors Silvar and Credo. Kun's lightsaber style was heavily influenced by his master, relying on the unorthodox. According to the Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide, Exar Kun was a master of the sixth form of lightsaber combat, Naiman. A hybrid fighting style, Naiman incorporated elements from the previous forms and balanced out their various specializations. Form 6 covered many of the various moves of lightsaber combat, but due to its emphasis on overall moderation, its focus on blade work was somewhat relaxed. Naiman was a jack-of-all-trades style, and the success of this form was largely dependent on the practitioner's intuition, improvisation, and creativity. It should also be noted that while Naiman provided no decisive edge in battle, it also had no major flaws. As stated in my original analysis of Exar Kun, I explained that I thought Naiman masters usually came in 3 distinct flavors. Them being, those who studied Form 6 as a supplement to their force abilities, or focused on another discipline entirely, and didn't truly focus on martial might, such as Johan Othone. Masters who used the style passively, using Naiman's adaptability to counter an opponent's style, adjusting their techniques to suit the need of the moment. And finally, a user who took all the styles and constantly changed forms in the midst of combat to overwhelm, confuse, and overpower opponents. Kun was without a doubt the third and final flavor. Kun's style tapped into an inner anger that lived inside the young man. This trait worried many during his time as a Jedi, but when he finally fell to the dark side, this trait made Kun's efficiency and ability even more deadly. Kun originally wielded a standard Jedi lightsaber with a blue blade. However, after his turn to the dark side, Kun redesigned his saber into a truly formidable piece of weaponry. The redesigned lightsaber was based on instructions hidden within an antiquated Sith holocron. The finished product was a double-bladed weapon imbued with dark side energy. The specific modifications were a second emitter matrix installed at the base of the hilt, and blade intensity and length adjustment controls. The blade's intensity could be switched from nothing more than a glow rod to a full-blown saber. Powering the weapon were most likely 2 blue Adegan crystals. Kun also wore Sith gauntlets that used to belong to Naga Sadow. While these were capable of creating large force blasts, more on that later, they provide little to no defensive help. Along with his offensive weapons, Kun also wore a customized light battlesuit, which offered considerable protection despite its weight and maintained good flexibility. While it has decent defensive capabilities, it wouldn't hold up against a dedicated lightsaber strike. In combat, Kun would start out ruthlessly attacking in an attempt to end the engagement quickly. His main goal was to off-balance and stagger. No matter what style he was employing, however, one thing was always constant, that being constantly using overwhelming and elaborate speed flurries. Another factor we have to consider is how Kun is employing his weapon. When wielding it as a single blade, Kun's impressive strength was on full display, and his approach was much more traditional. He used powerful head-on attacks, but also with speed and ridiculous accuracy. When both blades were active, however, Kun used his weapon like a quarterstaff. He would use one blade to defend, then spin the weapon rapidly with the other blade set for a killing blow. Also, when wielding his saber like this, the weapon's design made power strikes less viable, instead focusing on dexterity and speed. Kun was also a master of Trickata. Trickata was built off deception and the retractable blade on the lightsaber. Quickly shutting off and then reigniting the blade could confuse one's opponent, allowing for diversionary feints in combat. Kun also didn't need both blades to be active to employ such techniques. He could change the length of his weapon at a moment's notice, off-balancing and confusing them, switch between the 2 different blades, or even have both blades active but at different lengths. While he has never been seen utilizing them in combat, due to his technical sophistication, I wouldn't put it past him, especially if he was pushed. His style was also much more creative and unorthodox due to his chosen weapon, creating a style very few could replicate. As a 9-man specialist, it should come to no surprise that Kun was a master of Jar-Kai dual-blade fencing. He displayed his skill in the style often as a Jedi, doing so on one occasion with great success against his master Bodo CS boss. Offensively, Exar would begin with a more conventional, yet extremely aggressive approach, opening with a single blade. If he didn't overwhelm his opponent outright, as he began to be pushed, he would switch tactics, using both blades. He would use speed and advanced flurries to confuse and overwhelm. And if that didn't work, Kun would sprinkle in elements of Trickata. For as talented as Kun is, his defensive capabilities leave a little to be desired. His defensive philosophy was a good offense is a good defense. When pressed, he would use one of his more unorthodox techniques to surprise a foe and attempt to mount his own offensive once more. He has also been seen incorporating unarmed physical strikes into his sequences, favoring a powerful punch or a devastating kick. Surprisingly, Kun has never been seen incorporating force attacks into his lightsaber sequences. Considering this is a core aspect of the 9-man style, and how gifted Kun is as a force wielder, I don't think it would be difficult for him to infuse such attacks into his sequences, especially if he became desperate. Tactically, Exar Kun was a complete master. He has led forces to victory on multiple battlefronts, including Coruscant and Ossus, as well as knowing which strings to pull in order to give himself the greatest edge. He did this especially when converting former Jedi to his cause. In a one-on-one setting, Kun was still formidable, and by suddenly changing the intensity or length of his blades, was often able to trick his opponents into overextending themselves and create openings for fatal counterstrikes. Coupling his tactics with his ability to predict his enemy's actions through the Force, Kun was nearly unstoppable. In the end, Exar Kun was a complete master of his chosen discipline, and could wield it both in a traditional and unorthodox manner. On top of all this, Kun has never been defeated in a lightsaber duel, the closest being when he dueled Ulic Qel-Droma to a draw. And as much as I like Ulic, I think it's safe to say, had the spirit of Marka Ragnos not interfered, Kun would have eventually prevailed. He was prepared to face any combat situation, and could only be defeated by a true master of lightsaber combat.
With quite literally over 100 years of combat experience, and having self-proclaimed to have killed thousands of enemies, Darth Krayt's skill with the lightsaber is undeniable. As a Jar-Kai specialist, Krayt wields two standard lightsabers. The first was his original green-bladed lightsaber that he used during his time as a Jedi. The second was a crimson-bladed weapon that was constructed after he became a Sith Lord. His entry in the Legacy Era campaign guide states that he specialized in the variant of Jarkai attributed to the Naiman style, the sixth classical form of lightsaber combat. As a highly versatile and balanced form, this style provided its user with everything they needed to combat a wide variety of combat scenarios. As such, one of its most profound traits was the incorporated use of force powers, something Krayt has demonstrated an affinity for. Its relaxed nature allowed for minimal practice and study, allowing the users to focus their attention on other skills, which could lead to lacking skill in comparison to a more committed duelist. Such is the saying, "A jack of all trades but master of none." Fortunately for the one Sith Emperor, he did not fall victim to this detriment, and could instead be described as an expert of all. As an interesting side note, I stated my belief in my Ashrad vs Quinlan remaster, that Het initially specialized in the Ataru variant of Jarkai, given his tendency to incorporate well-timed physical attacks into his lightsaber sequences. However, upon further research, it turns out that he specialized in Naiman even as a Jedi. Still, given how both of his Jedi mentors were specialists in Form 4, I still believe that it's plausible that Het would have picked up a reasonable level of familiarity with his style, courtesy of their sparring matches. With grounded footwork and swift saber strikes, Krayt made for an extremely well-rounded and deadly opponent. Even as a Jedi, Het demonstrated that he was born to be a warrior. Not only did he survive the overwhelming odds of the Clone Wars, but he also survived altercations with both Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Even though Anakin was still only a Padawan at this time, he was still noted to possess the speed of fully trained Jedi Masters, and even put up more of a fight against Count Dooku than Kenobi had. During their altercation, Het managed to disarm Anakin whilst wielding nothing but a broken Gaddafi stick, demonstrating excellent martial prowess, likely making use of his expertise in Terraskazi, an unarmed martial art designed for ordinary beings to combat Force wielders. He passed this skill onto one of his Tusken followers, as established in an article that used to be on StarWars.com. When fighting against Obi-Wan, the exiled master was forced to admit that he was at a terrenial disadvantage, and that it had been 2 years since he had last dueled. Still, considering how much of a threat he was to Darth Vader when they fought years later, I think it's safe to say that his skills degraded rather slowly. As such, one should be astonished at Het's ability to contend with such a formidable Jedi Master. Over the course of both his Jedi and Sith careers, he made use of the reverse grip attributed to the Xi'an variant of Form 5, granting him a solid degree of skill in both blast deflection and counterattacks. By the time of his ascension to Sith Lord, his skills had multiplied exponentially. Even while severely crippled by his Vong implants, he decimated several of Roan Fel's Imperial Knights, all of which were highly trained and disciplined. There is also the case of both of his fights with Cade Skywalker. Cade had already gone toe-to-toe with, and even defeated Krayt's most skilled enforcers, and yet in both of their encounters, the young Jedi was able to best the one Sith Emperor, and was even forced onto his back foot in their final duel, even though Krayt was likely holding back, as he needed Cade alive, and was only killed by way of cheap shot. As one of the most experienced duelists to have ever lived, Darth Krayt earned his place as a well-practiced duelist who could overwhelm many Force users, a man whose experience and skill was as extensive as the variety of enemies that he has killed. This round, much like most of this matchup, is very close. Starting from the top, both combatants wield weapons that grant them immense versatility. For Kun, it comes in the form of his double-bladed weapon, and for Krayt, his dual sabers. While Kun's weapon or Krayt's dual blades may cause trouble for lesser combatants, these two are far too talented and can handle these unorthodox approaches.
Both combatants specialize in the sixth form of lightsaber combat, however both wield it differently. Where both attempt to use the form to overwhelm their opposition, Krayt uses a relatively common Jarkai approach, whereas Kun uses two approaches, that is, his strength-oriented single-bladed approach, or his more dangerous, an unorthodox double-bladed approach. Krayt's style is no doubt dangerous. However, due to Kun's expertise, as well as his own mastery of the Jarkai style, he is far more equipped to handle it than most adversaries Krayt faces. When we look at it from the opposite perspective, Kun's style is something Krayt would have never seen before, and when engaged with an opponent as technically sound as Kun, may give the one Sith leader trouble.
Not to mention, we agree that Kun's showings are more impressive than Krayt's, especially when we take into account Krayt's best showing as a Sith came against Darth Warlock, known more for his skills with the Force rather than the lightsaber. We aren't trying to say that Krayt is a bad lightsaber duelist, because he is not. We are simply pointing out that unlike Kun, Krayt has never truly bested elite competition. Besides an enraged Padawan Anakin, his only other showings against elite competition came against Obi-Wan, where he held multiple advantages and still lost.
On the other hand, Kun has bested Vodabas, a renowned Jedi combat instructor, and dueled Ula Keldroma to a draw. Had this contest not been stopped by Marka Ragnos, we believe Kun would have emerged victorious. We find this very impressive as well, considering the fact that we both have an incredibly high opinion of Keldroma, which you can see in our other videos, such as Ula Keldroma vs Mace Windu, or Ula Keldroma vs Luke Skywalker. On top of all this, Kun has never even come close to losing in a contest of martial skill. All in all, Kun's unique style, combined with his technical skill, are enough to cause Krayt issues and give him an advantage. Exar Kun gets the edge.
Round 3.
From a young age, Exar Kun demonstrated immense skill and potential in his use of the Force. While as a Jedi he only utilized basic light side abilities, as a Sith Lord, Kun truly came into his own, becoming one of the strongest Force users and dark side adepts in galactic history. The complete Star Wars Encyclopedia also states that Exar Kun was the most powerful Dark Lord of the Sith from his lineage and of his time. This places him above the likes of Frida Nad, Karnus Mur, Marka Ragnos, Naga Sadow, and many others. Like all Force wielders, Exar Kun was able to use the Force to augment his physical traits. He paired this with Force Rage, boosting his speed, increase his already formidable strength and dexterity, and finally, hold up in intense lightsaber duels. In more common abilities, Kun was very proficient in the use of telekinesis. The Dark Lord had no problem performing Force pushes, shoves, and grips. He also had no trouble lifting and throwing large objects, doing so with ease on multiple occasions. Kun used telekinesis with incredible accuracy and intense power, being able to break through the shields of other Force wielders with relative ease. One of the most prominent examples being how he threw Silvar back with a mere flick of his hand. He was able to find the right balance here, similar to that of Count Dooku, unleashing his full power often, but also had no trouble using his power subtly when required. Exar Kun was also capable of more advanced forms of telekinesis, specifically Force Whirlwind. Whirlwind was a more advanced form of Force Push, and a rather feeble version of Force Wave. The user would alter the air currents around an opponent, turning it into a maelstrom. This swirling force would lift an opponent into the air, spin them around, and leave them incapable of moving out of it. In addition to this, the Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide clearly credits him with skill in the Deadly Force Wound ability, where Kun could telekinetically cause spasms in the lungs and other organs of his targets, painfully injuring them. He demonstrated his mastery of this ability on Ossus, using it to kill the famed Jedi Master Odan-Ur. His defense against telekinesis was just as impressive as his offensive skill, and he could only be affected by the strongest of Force Masters. On top of all that, the campaign guide also credits Kun with knowledge of Force Stun. Force Stun was a Force power that could temporarily deaden the senses and perceptions of a targeted enemy, preventing most movements. While this power could be manifested into intense applications, such as Force Stasis and Stasis Field, Kun has never been displayed employing such powers. However, I really wouldn't put it past him. In terms of telepathy, Exar Kun was a master and could use the basic Jedi mind trick with no difficulty at all. He was also able to rip information from one's mind, as he did to the Massassi on Yavin 4. In addition, his Force sense was also very well developed and managed to sense the spirit of Frida Nad, reaching across the galaxy to communicate with Krath sorcerers, and also sense their intent to succeed Nad and become the new Sith rulers. Kun was also very adept in the concealment arts, and could mask his Force alignment, and even his entire presence from other Force sensitives, such as he did on Ossus. Energy-based attacks were also right up Kun's alley, and he was a practiced hand with Force lightning. While the intensity of this lightning was unknown, considering Kun's strengths in other aspects of the Force, I wouldn't be surprised to say it's on the same level as that of Darth Bane. However, he restrained from using lightning in combat, instead preferring to use his gauntlets. Originally belonging to the powerful Sith Lord Naga Sadow, Kun claimed the ancient gauntlets when he discovered them on Yavin 4. The gauntlets amplify and focus the rage of the user, and unleash beams of raw dark side energy. Kun has shown quite the range with his power as well. He could use the beam to nearly incapacitate an opponent, or decimate whatever stood in his way, such as when he used them to completely obliterate the spirit of Freed Nat. Defensively, Kun had many abilities to call upon. He is primarily credited with skill in energy resistance, suggesting skill in Tutaminis. While Exar is most likely not capable of catching a lightsaber, I'm fairly confident in saying that he can defend against blasters, and even possibly Force lightning. Exar Kun also had knowledge of the deadly Force Sever ability. Although he himself has never been seen using the attack, he did at least have enough understanding of it to defend himself against it, doing so against Odan a master of the technique. In the rare case he was battered in a contest, the Dark Lord was proficient in the rare Dark Healing arts. Although it was believed that malevolent Force users could not employ Force healing, this was a wrong assumption. The dark side could in fact be used to heal, but not nearly to the extent of using the light. The healing was also only temporary, and required renewed applications or constant concentration to remain active. While an impressive feat, Kun's true power lied in his knowledge of Sith sorcery and alchemy. The best display of his magic can be seen when he casts a spell on the entire Galactic Senate, consisting of thousands, forcing them into stillness and compelling them to watch. He also stunned an unknown amount of Jedi, with only a few resisting him. He then proceeded to conduct a speech to the entire chamber, using the Grand Chancellor of the Galactic Senate as his vessel. In regards to alchemy, Kun conducted a number of experiments, successfully creating battle hydras and Takata. His most famous experiment, however, was when he successfully transformed the Massassi priest into a powerful, alchemically enhanced darkside monster. While there is no doubt that Kun's knowledge of sorcery and alchemy is impressive, the main problem is he refrains from using it in combat. The only time we have seen him use sorcery in combat was when he displayed the technique Darkside Tendrils against Luke. This is the same technique that Darth Zana used against her master years later on Ambria. My main issue with this is in order to use this attack, he needed his power in the Force, as well as that of Kip Durin. Normally it wouldn't make a huge difference, except in this case, Durin had immense skill with the Force, considered one of the greatest Jedi in an era full of greats. In his natural state, we have never seen him use sorcery in combat. Although he possibly could use it, it's a bit of a stretch in my eyes, and would likely only use it as a last resort. Kun's most impressive display of the Force, however, came in his final moments, when he displayed his use of essence transfer, able to cheat death. In his final moments, he performed a ritual in his Temple of Power on Yavin 4, in response to the Jedi's collective attempt at destroying him. After strapping himself to an apparatus, he siphoned the life force of thousands of Massassi, binding him to the temple as a spirit, and providing him with enough Force reserves to last him 4 millennia. At the end of the day, Exar Kun was one of the most powerful Force wielders in the Sith Order. He had both defensive, offensive, as well as exoteric abilities that allowed him to succeed against all Force users of any caliber.
To say that Darth Krayt was one of the most powerful Sith Lords in galactic history would be a dramatic understatement. By the time of his death, his power scaled insanely high to levels above and beyond every member of the One Sith Order, and he had no true equal during the period in which he was active. In terms of raw power, he has humbled both Darth Nihil and Cade Skywalker, the latter of which was strong enough to throw shuttles around like basketballs. Being canonically more powerful than Warlock also speaks volumes, as the Shagrian Sith concretely dominated the ancient Sith Lord Darth Andedu. His raw power was so impressive that he, alongside Luke Skywalker, was partially successful in defending against a telekinetic blast from the Force entity Abeloth. His telekinetic prowess was monstrous. Aside from the extreme examples of its basic applications that were just laid forth, he has also demonstrated skill with the ranged saber throw technique, and has been credited with skills in the Force Repulse, which only amplifies his destructive potential. Like the vast majority of Sith, he attained an excellent skill with Force Lightning, which too had amazing destructive potential. Krayt's lightning was so powerful that he was able to kill other beings with it, even when suffering from the diminished connection to the Force afflicted by his implants. Furthermore, his power was also strong enough to outright kill the Yuzhong Vong, a species that are known to resist the Force itself. As a master telepath, sensed Cade Skywalker's use of dark transfer from across the galaxy, and upon his revival, he sent ripples of dark side energy throughout the universe, touching the minds of every living Sith at the time. A feat that I dare say could give Master Yoda a run for his money. His skills in this field also extended to a horrific mastery of Force illusions, having wielded such a power against Cade in their final duel, subjecting him to horrifying visions of his future. Krayt reinforced his survivability with extensive knowledge in defensive powers and healing techniques. As previously mentioned, his Force barrier was potent enough to partially resist the power of a being that may as well be considered a Force god. His ability to absorb and redirect energy attacks with Tutor Minis was also astute, having blocked a burst of lightning from Darth Warlock that was strong enough to shatter a pair of stone pillars. In order to stave off the negative effects of his Vong growths, he learned how to wield Force Drain and Consume Essence, the latter of which allowed him to feed off of the negative emotions of others, including the entire population of Mon Calamari, and using the former against both an injured Grandmaster Luke and Abeloth. And finally, Krayt had all but ensured that his conquest would be successful upon learning how to use powers of both Essence Transfer and Dark Transfer. Essence Transfer allowed the user to quite literally transfer their mind and consciousness into the body of a target. However, the target must not be able to resist, as failure to use this power successfully results in death. Dark Transfer was an extremely rare ability that relied on a combination of Force Healing, Force Lightning, and Shatterpoint. By using Shatterpoint to pinpoint the weak spots in a living target, the wielder could pour Force energy into these areas to either torture and kill a target, or heal any and all injuries and ailments, even those that were said to be lethal or incurable. However, this power is not an automatic trump card for Krayt, as it requires physical contact to make use of it, and thus if he is confronted by a more skillful martial artist, it is unlikely that he'll be able to make use of this ability. To summarize, Darth Krayt is one of the most knowledgeable and powerful Sith Lords to walk the galaxy. His deep saturation in the dark side of the Force is bound to leave all of those he encounters in awe.
This round is one that both combatants excel in. They each claim the prestigious title of being the most powerful Sith of their day, despite incredible competition. Both possess an extensive amount of variety and powers alien to the other. In Exar Kun's case, this would be things such as his Force Blasts, Force Stun, Whirlwind, and so on. For Krayt, this extends to his use of things such as Force Drain and Dark Transfer. Surprisingly, they also possess a similar affinity for many powers too, Sorcery and Illusions being one of them.
However, in this regard, Darth Krayt appears to be the more viable. For one, Exar Kun's use of alchemy has next to no combative applications, and the abilities he can make use of, he simply doesn't. Krayt in this regard is much more inclined to put his abilities to good use, which ultimately makes him a more practical Force user across the board. Kun is capable of some impressive feats of power and can even defend against some impressive strength, but he just hasn't shown the same amount of destructive potential as the one Sith Emperor. Furthermore, Krayt's ability to even partially defend against and even injure Force wielders that substantially outweigh Kun in power suggests that he is more than capable of defending against the likes of Kun's Force Blasts. Lastly, although Dark Transfer is unlikely to come into play, if it does, Kun has virtually no counter to this power, which would result in his death. Even if you want to argue that these two are equals in power, Krayt's abilities offer more practicality, which combined with his higher inclination to use such powers leads to us awarding the one Sith Emperor the edge in Force abilities.
Final round.
This battle is one that is likely to test the limits of both warriors, pushing their skills and power to their limit. The final tally ranges at approximately 7 out of 10 in favour of the victor. The fight will take place within the One Sith Temple, where Cade confronted Krayt, with Kun taking the place of Skywalker.
Sensing the immense power within one another, both Dark Lords would enter the battle cautiously, not wanting to overextend themselves. Igniting their lightsabers, they would engage in a fairly straightforward battle of swordsmanship. The walls would be lit up by a beautiful display of sapphire, emerald, and ruby glares as their blades clash over the course of several minutes. Realizing his opponent is too well practiced for a standard contest, Exar Kun reveals the second blade of his weapon, and begins to make use of his more lethal and unpredictable fighting style.
Taken aback, the surprised yet impressed Darth Krayt begins to give ground, as he finds an increasing level of difficulty attempting to find an opening in Kun's form. Finally having to admit that he can't win this way, he steps back and begins attacking Kun with the full might of his raw power, forcing his opponent into a new type of duel. Beams of energy would glow, the environment would crumble around them. At first, this new contest would also appear even. Krayt blocks energy blasts, Kun mentally pushes through illusions. However, one continuously begins to gain ground.
With every attack and counter, Krayt closes the gap and draws Kun in, where upon closing the distance, he ignites his own saber-based offensive. Exar Kun defends expertly and prepares to make use of his unusual form once again, only to realize his mistake. This time, the One Sith Emperor doesn't let up. Now attacking with both saber and force, Krayt continuously drives Exar back, all while keeping him within reach in order to prevent him from recovering and gaining any opportunity to retaliate. Eventually, Krayt backs Kun into a corner and slants him into the wall behind him, and instantaneously impales him through the chest. And thus, we declare Darth Krayt, the Dark Lord of the Sith, the One Sith Emperor, the victor.
Well, that's all from myself and Rob. We really hope you enjoyed this collaboration, as it was a ton of fun to work on. A big thank you to Rob for joining me on this project. Again, I encourage you all to check out his channel, which is linked in the description. His work is of fantastic quality, and he's got some great matches lined up. Anyway, until next time, feel free to follow me on social media, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you. Always.